Hello, and welcome once again to Escaping Dystopia. My name is Wall. I'll be your host for tonight. Today's episode is Operation Epstein Fury. Today is March 23rd, 2026. The war in Iran now walks into its fourth week as global markets react to Donald's ridiculous counteracting tweets as he makes up this as he goes along. Before we get to that, I would like to talk about something. This has been something we talk about a lot on the show here. For those of you who aren't aware, I like to talk about this thing I call spaceship Earth theory, a moral theory that human beings could possibly should start thinking about. As we see yet another war in the Middle East started for all sorts of ridiculous reasons, some of them all the way down to being tribal, we wonder, why are we doing this? What are we fighting over? And now we've seen that this is about oil once again, a war in the Middle East about oil. Meanwhile, and I'm going to talk about that here in a second, but first, before I want to do that, this March already, here in Colorado and in many places in the western United States, has been breaking all sorts of heat records. We hit, I think, 90 degrees somewhere up in Fort Collins. All new highs here. There's this massive heat dome. This is after one of the weakest winters that we've had in the history of Colorado. Certainly since we've been here, but actually all the way back, as long as they've been keeping records for the snowpack. This is going to have, as many of these things do over time, compounding effects as we have less water going downstream, less water everywhere around, all the way through the Colorado River. And that leads to more wildfires, which leads to all sorts of more difficult problems. The climate crisis that has been creeping up on us is here, and we're starting to see anomalies outside of the bounds of anything that was expected consistently. That's where we are right now. Part of the reason why I'm doing this show here on Escaping Dystopia is, one, to chronicle this, to journal it, right, as someone who is doing something that's similar to journalism, as you'll say, over time, but also to let people in the future know that we knew all this was happening. We've known this since the late 1900s, that this was happening in the planet, and what we're seeing now was predicted then. The reason why it's not being dealt with correctly is politics. So, the war with Iran. Speaking of politics. So Donald is wildly unpopular. He's having all sorts of mental problems. Can't keep things straight, constantly forgetting stuff, berating people, back and forth. This war, in particular, has really, really exposed that. And also, one of the things that's happened now in the last couple days quite distinctly is he's just lying about things. Lying directly and specifically. There's two that I want to bring up real quick before we get more into this. A few days ago, he claimed that he had spoken to a previous United States president about his decision to unleash the military in Iran, and claiming that, they had, I wish I had done that. I wish I had the balls to do that. I wish I was as tough as you. This is a constant theme of these made-up stories that he has about, they're all self-aggrandizing. They're all part of his narcissism. But this one in particular was difficult because he does this all the time with, this supporter came up to me with tears in his eyes. There was this executive. This super powerful guy. You would know him. Right? He makes up these stories all the time. But now, this time, he did it with a previous President of the United States. Here, watch this clip.
I'm asking you about something very interesting that you said twice today. That you talked to another former president about the Iran strikes.
I did.
Was it George W. Bush?
No.
Was it Bill Clinton?
I don't want to say. I don't want to say. Because
Barack Obama?
a member of a party, and they have Trump derangement syndrome, but it's somebody that happens to like me, and I like that person who's a smart person. But that person said, I wish I did it. Okay? But I don't want to get into who.
Okay.
I don't want to get him into trouble. Maybe, hey,
I have a guess.
you know what? Yeah, I think you probably know. You know, it's interesting. And maybe he'd be proud. And I could even ask him that.
And so you see, this isn't ambiguous here, and I actually brought it up twice. And so this hasn't really been followed up by the press. There were a few stories on that, and then now we move on. But the same thing has now just happened with Iran, where he's claiming that they're negotiating, talking to somebody, doing this to try and calm the markets. Meanwhile, Iran is responding saying, no, he's not. And his counter-join is like, well, I can't tell you who it is because Israel will kill them. So we're in this very, very difficult place with this war. Part of why I wanted to do a show, to get it up, catch everything up to speed for myself so we can just move on from here. But anyway, this started with essentially double the amount of firepower from shock and awe, from the Iraq War, which was at the time this massive amount. Basically, we're clearing out inventory. And it happens about every 20 years in the U.S. And I just really, folks, hope people catch on. This is now my, third cycle kind of seeing this. So the next one, as we get there down the road, that's part of why I want to inform people. People know that this happens every now and again. They didn't even have to try and sell the public on it. There wasn't even hearings. There was nothing. Donald just decided to do it based on the advice of a few people. So we sent an absolute ton of ordnance. We blew up a lot of things in Iran. And I'll probably go back and forth in saying Iran and Iran a lot because I'm from Texas, and that's part of the deal with that. We've also seen, and I'll show you the clip on this, Israel has also done at least or more strikes than the United States Air Force has. This is one of the aspects of this war. It's very much a U.S.-Israeli joint operation. That's causing a lot of difficulties because both countries have very, very different goals. Israel's goal here is regional dominance, getting rid of a regional adversary. The nukes, again, were addressed last summer, right, with those bunker-busting bombs where they claimed to have obliterated the entire thing. The intelligence system was saying they weren't coming back. Netanyahu, of course, lies about this. He's been lying about this for 30 plus years. Everyone knows that, but now a bunch of people are acting like, no, he's totally on the level. And so we've gone with Israel with the notion of going after nukes that were already destroyed, of degrading their military, which we've clearly failed to do. I'll get to that in a moment. And so the actual goal of this war has never been made, and they've never even tried, really, and they just kept shifting back and forth, and none of it makes any sense because Donald just lies constant. That's what he does, and that's his thing. I've said this before, but the lies are the fascism. And as he lies about, we have to have voter ID, so we need this law that means that only the federal government can decide who votes because they have to have a passport, and no, the passport office is closed and nobody's registered and everybody's good. This is what they're trying to do with the SAVE Act, by the way, which is another thing that I'll touch on a little bit more, domestic politics. It looks like it's going to die, which is good, but the fact that it's on the table and Republicans are voting for it to the degree that it has to be vetoed, it has to be filibustered by the Democrats, is difficult. So going back to the war. So the Strait of Hormuz is, here's the map of it. Obviously, you've probably seen this a few times. Anybody who's ever spent any time on international politics, especially in the Middle East, knows that this has always been the big reason why you don't do this, right? The geography of the area, the historical familiarity with it. Iran controls it and has always done so, and that's been kind of the idea behind why it's always been such a difficult thing to deal with on the international stage, because of the power involved, right? The Kuwait is right there on the corner of this thing. Everything that they do has to come out of there, right? And that's where, again, a lot of the LNG plant that was blown up and a lot of these other places, all of this stuff comes through here. So now it's kind of closed. It's closed to the U.S. Iran is literally bragging about how they're letting Chinese ships come through. Now the ships that are going through are going much closer to the Iranian coast, not through the normal shipping channels, which means they're under complete control the whole time. This is, to say this is a disaster from an international politics perspective, is it's hard to even really explain that. how big and huge a mistake this is going to be. I'm feeling a lot of very much like COVID things. So in the last weeks as well, Donald has claimed multiple times that Iran is totally defeated. Then they shot down an F-35. There's an aircraft carrier that's out of commission. They're taking a lot of credit for that. There was a bunch of fires. There's a bunch of other problems. But anyway, it's out of commission. We have these THAADs, the THAADs, these high-tech satellite installations, which are great targets. Again, that's the first thing you target with stuff during these kind of wars. I think we've lost a number of them. Each one is several $100 million. It gets blown up. So much so that we took one from South Korea and moved it over there, and then it got blown up. The oil infrastructure around is targeted at will. Iran has followed through a number of times now with saying, hey, if you guys keep going after our infrastructure, we're going to blow all this stuff up, which again puts the entire global economy on notice. It's already slowing down. The oil prices are already quite high. Gas prices, of course, despite the basic month-long time it takes for that new higher-priced oil to be delivered and then refined. And then, anyway, they raise prices immediately. Again, with oil prices quite high and the economy now in shambles, we're left with a little serious question of why did this happen? Why did Donald do this? And the answers have been all over the place, but the question of why now, what pushed him to now, was answered pretty clearly by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who for a lot of this has actually been completely sidelined by Donald's son-in-law, Kushner, and Witkoff, who business partner, I think. Anyway, here's Rubio.
The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
And he, of course, had to walk that back the next day, tried to unsay it. But then also we had the head of counterterrorism for the government resign and say the same thing in his statement here. And then Donald himself comes out and says, oh yeah, we're trying to get these people to stop being so aggressive because that's causing the pushback that everybody hates and is causing all the things to blow up all the way around the world. And so it's clear from this point that we have very differing goals about what we're trying to do and what Israel's trying to accomplish with this aggression. The U.S. claims, again, like we did in Iraq, that this was something about weapons of mass destruction and we have to get that. But that was what we did last summer when we blew up their nuclear program. So there's no real actual argument here that the program was reconstituted, that it was there, and it was to Netanyahu's lie, oh, a couple weeks away from a bomb. This is just complete horseshit. So that wasn't there. Our goals with our only ally involved are very, very different. NATO is not going to be involved. They've all rejected this. Also, the North Atlantic is not the Strait of Hormuz. So that's a totally different place. And so we're not getting there. We've been berating the allies. China has basically told, hey, everyone, let's just chill out and nobody else get involved here, which is, hey, everybody chill out. Nobody else get involved. The U.S. is on their own. There's now unsanctioned oil also going on with the Russians who've gotten a windfall from this, and Iran himself have now gotten sanction relief to the tune of 10 times the amount that Obama provided for the joint deal that we had originally. So we had a deal in place that they agreed with to not enrich nuclear weapons. Donald tore it up, and then they started doing, and now we're back to this other place where now he's unsanctioned Iranian oil once again. It's absurd, and it's horrible, and it's clear that, again, Donald's dementia is getting worse. It's not something that you can really deny and be an honest person about commenting on American politics at this point. So, with all that said and talking about all this other stuff, what have we not been saying and not been talking about? And the answer, of course, there is the Epstein files. This continues to be a story that bubbles up every now and again. There are still many, many files that are missing. They have unveiled a couple of them via members of Congress going in personally and looking. And so we continue to see this news trickle out. We have this, war now going on with the U.S. and Israel doing this. And in the Epstein files, you have this complete documentation. And again, this is tough for me because I'm a data guy, right? And I like to see the evidence of everything beforehand. And I'm reading through these files, and again, I'm downloading them myself to my computer. I'm looking at this on myself. And this is evidence of this global conspiracy between all these billionaires and investors and large organizations. The biggest ones, of course, have still not been touched by this. That's the folks over at Apollo. There's many other very, very powerful, rich, wealthy people who are involved with this. And until we get a Justice Department that is going to follow through with this, there's not gonna be anything that's gonna happen. We have until November and the midterms. This is why the SAVE Act is so important for Donald, because he's so wildly unpopular. And any normal election under our rules that we've had in the 249 years of our nation, he would get absolutely crushed and then be a lame duck with no power, no more elections, and basically useless for the last 2 years of his presidency. This is what happened to George W. Bush after the public soured on the Iraq War. After he was reelected in 2004, in 2006, they lost the midterms, he lost Congress, he lost all popularity and everybody, and then basically was pushed out to the side. With Donald, if he can't run again. Bannon, by the way, is claiming he's going to run again in 2028. Bannon, by the way, is all over the Epstein files. So Donald, after 2026, after these midterms, is going to be a lame duck, can't run again, no Congress, unable to negotiate, president. And that's within 6-7 months from now. So there is the potential for this really brighter spot here within the next 8 or 9 months here in the U.S. We've already been through a year of this constant lies and stupidity and racism and dumbness and just blah, 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 blah. Sorry. It's tough. It's tough because when you want to have respect for the system and the institutions and all that, and there's a lot of people who put a lot of work in across the board to make sure everything continues to work and function normally. A lot of professionals out there doing good work, and then you have just these complete, inept, malicious morons doing horrible damage, and also damage to the credibility of all of these institutions, which is one of those things that, again, much like anything you build up, years to build, seconds to destroy, right? It is always, in any system, easier to destroy than it is to create. And so we're in a system now that's really fallen down all around us. But there's that bright point, right? Stick to the elections, try and get folks who aren't involved more involved. I'm trying to focus more on just general overall allyship as far as I don't care too much about the details, but you do see how bad this is, right? Okay. Let's take care of that first, and then we can move on and do some more fun stuff. So anyway, I think I had to do this again. This was the second version of this with just light notes, which I get a little improvisational. So we lost some fun things that I said and tried to reference, but I don't know how much I got across the half-remembered points that I made 10 minutes ago that disappeared into the ether. So anyway, thanks for dropping by. I hope to see you again at the show. It's good to always get this stuff out. Understand that other people do see how crazy this is, and it is nuts. This is nuts. Donald is out of control. The guardrails are gone. We're literally bombing, killing people. It is going to come around, as life does. Anyway, I think we'll be okay. We're still not all the way gone, folks. So let's try and focus on that for a while. All right. Peace out and have a good one. Save this, please.